Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. First and foremost, I want to say thank you so much. At the time of this recording, I'm sitting at 199 subscribers and I expect it to be 200 by the end of the day. My goal is to hit 200 by the end of the month, so if you are new to the channel, you just subscribed, thank you so much. And for all the people that have been here for a while, thank you as well. 200 subscribers is really cool. I'm just so happy that people want to come and see my stuff over and over again. And for everybody that has liked and commented, engaged with the stuff, I've gotten lots of views on a lot of my videos lately. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Today I want to talk about my favorite and least favorite controllers in all of video game history here. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not going to be talking about like some of the worst controllers ever. Like, you won't see like the Power Glove and the Atari Jaguar. We're not going to get into those ones. Mostly mainstream controllers is what I want to talk about today. So I want to talk about some of my favorites and some of the ones that I really have not liked using. So I'll be going back and forth between them. First and foremost, I want to start off with one of my favorite controllers of all time, one that I still use to this day. That's the GameCube controller. I think this is a super innovative controller. It's still relevant today, typically for like the Smash Brothers scene. If you play competitive Smash, it's something that has been supported since Smash Brothers Melee. And it's really cool that they have been able to support that controller for so long, and it's just feels so nice. It's got a nice ergonomic style. I love the C stick. I love the Z button that's just kind of small. The only improvement it really needs is having a second shoulder button. And if you get like the newer versions, like the Switch version of the GameCube controller that's wireless, adds an extra shoulder button on the left side. But otherwise, I feel like this is a really solid controller, and I love everything about its design. And then let's go about with another one that I really don't like, which is the Nintendo 64 controller. This one was a real miss by Nintendo. I think this likely contributed to the Nintendo 64 also not doing as well. I think it's mostly a cartridge versus CD thing, but man, was this controller awful. It's just, I mean, look at this design. It's just so bad. Why would you have 3 spots? No one has 3 hands. It's even weirder that the control stick is in the middle, because you're going to be using that more often, way more often than you're ever going to be using the D-pad. And it's bizarre. And the same thing with the Z button on the middle part of the trick of the controller. It's just weird how they designed this. I don't understand what they were going for. It just doesn't work very well at all. So I really don't like the Nintendo 64 controller as much as I love the console itself. Now let's go back a little bit further to the Super Nintendo. I think this controller is also really fantastic. I love its design. I love how it has the rounded edges. I think the way you hold it feels pretty good. Even to this day, like going back and holding an SNES controller, it feels pretty nice to hold. It's not like the most ergonomic controller ever made, of course. I mean, this is an old design way back when. This was a huge improvement on my not so favorite controller, which is the Nintendo Entertainment System controller. Now this is a classic. I don't want to like rip on this controller. This was iconic for the time, but if you go back and play with this controller now, it doesn't feel nearly as comfortable to use. I've like played the NES Mini, and going back, I'm like, oh man, this one just, it feels a little cramped. It just doesn't feel exactly right. I think the SNES is a big improvement on the NES controller. Next, let's talk about the DualShock and the DualShock 2. These controllers were fantastic. The original PlayStation controller was missing the analog sticks, but then they innovated with the DualShock controller and made it significantly better. Having the twin sticks is a massive improvement for any controller. If you look at like stuff like the 3DS, the original 3DS, having a single stick is really sucky. You want to have that twin stick movement, and this was an awesome thing to have way back in the day. And the Xbox also had a controller that was not nearly as good with the Duke. I'm not talking about the original Xbox controller. This is the original Xbox controller, the giant controller that they had at launch. This thing is huge. It's cumbersome. Like the button layout is a little bit weird. It just feels bad to hold. I don't know what they were thinking with the Duke controller, but they fixed it shortly thereafter with the Xbox controller, and they got significantly better over the years. But that first one was a clear misstep. But it's really funny that it's so iconic that they've even brought it back for like a new release on the Xbox Series X, I believe, or maybe it was on the Xbox One. I think that's pretty cool that they still have some love for that old controller, despite it being kind of wonky and big. Next, let's talk about the 360 controller. Now, this was a clear improvement on even like the Xbox controller that they had. This is one of the best designed controllers ever, and you can see that to this day because Xbox has just been innovating on their 360 controller. It was really nice to hold, very ergonomic. The layout of the stick up high and then one down low on the right side was really brilliant. The back triggers were really satisfying. 360 controller is one of the best controllers ever made, for sure. And let's contrast that with a not so good controller with the 6-axis or the DualShock 3. This one, when it came out, was really not good. They took out the rumble support, they put in motion controls. It felt really light in your hands, which is not a bad thing, but it felt like there was no heft to it, like it was a toy. So they really missed the mark here. With the DualShock 1 and 2 being so fantastic, they really made the DualShock 3 something not to be desired. And that was, again, part of the reason I think controllers can play a big reason in people not liking the console, even for the whole generation. I don't love this controller. I had a PlayStation 3 for a long time, and I still go back and I'm like, oh man, yeah, this does not feel nearly as good. Contrast that with the PlayStation 4 controller, which is another fantastic controller. It feels so much better. It's much wider. It has like a better grip on the handles there. It feels so nice. Same with the Xbox One. I'll just talk about these two in tandem here. The Xbox One controller is really fantastic too, mostly because it's an iteration on the 360, just a little bit slimmed down, feels really nice to hold. I remember going to my friend's house and playing on his Xbox One thinking, man, this is a really nice controller. As much as I love my PlayStation 4 controller, this is pretty sweet too. So the PS4 and Xbox One really, I think this is the generation that they really hit across the board. They really did a fantastic job with these controllers. But if you look at Sega's controllers throughout the years, I want to talk about their main system controllers and how I don't think they're nearly as good as they could have been. I really don't like the original Genesis controller very much, mostly because of how it curves. I think it's fine. I think the button layout is not that bad either. When you had like the 6 button on the front, it was kind of cool, good for fighting games and such. But I don't think they did a good job overall with how comfortable it is to hold. Same thing with the Saturn, and then same thing with the Dreamcast. Again, I'm a huge Dreamcast guy. I love the Dreamcast, but this controller just doesn't really work nowadays. It doesn't feel as good to hold, mostly because it's slippery. It doesn't feel as tactile. It's hard to grip onto. So I think Sega really missed the mark with controllers. I think they fell behind in the console race, and only a little bit of that reason was their controllers. I don't think that was a huge deal, but again, sometimes controllers can play a big part in people actually enjoying the console itself. Let's talk about the Wii Remote next. I think this is a really fantastic controller. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck is a really weird, innovative thing with motion controls and having a sensor bar so you can point at the screen and move it around. I think it was a really fantastic idea, and they did a lot of good with this. But it's also really bad at the same time. Going back and playing with the Wii Remote is just not nearly as enjoyable as it used to be, especially trying to hold it sideways. I think they did, again, I think this is a good controller and a bad controller at the same time. I think that they did a lot with it, but by the end of the life cycle, you could tell that this was a very gimmicky thing that probably wasn't going to last. We do see some of the design coming back with the Joy-Con, but the Joy-Con is at least improved in a lot of ways with like the motion controls and such, but I don't think the overall design of the Wii Remote holds up anymore. I think it was really good when it came out. I think it worked, but man, is it obsolete now compared to the much better controllers we have nowadays. Next, I want to talk about the Wii U and the Switch Pro controllers. These controllers are fantastic. They both really pulled out the stops for these. The Wii U Pro controller is like, I think an 80-hour battery life controller, something outrageous, and it feels really nice to hold in your hands. It's lighter, but not nearly as light as like the DualShock 3 was. It feels really good to play, and you can hold it in your hands for a very long time. And the fact that you didn't have to charge it very much was really cool. Same thing with the Switch Pro controller. It has a shortened battery life, but it's much better than its contemporaries as well. I think it probably boasts like 20, 30 hours, something like that. If I'm mistaken, please correct me in the comments. But it also has a pretty darn good battery life, at least from my own testing, and it feels a little bit better than the Wii U Pro controller to hold. I love playing Smash on the GameCube controller, but if I give my GameCube controller to somebody else to use, I don't mind using the Switch Pro controller. And playing other games like Breath of the Wild, any of the Zelda games, Mario games, feels fantastic on this controller. And let's also talk about some bad ones with the Wii U gamepad and the Joy-Cons. The Wii U gamepad is just too huge. I love how innovative it was and that it led to the Switch becoming becoming a thing at all. But man, if the Wii U gamepad was not a cumbersome controller to hold. It's enormous. The sticks are so far apart. It doesn't feel good to hold for long periods of time. It's just not something that you want to be playing as. Contrast that with the Joy-Cons that are really small and not very durable and have the Joy-Con drift and having all these issues to go along with it. I think the Joy-Cons are a great idea. The fact that you can pull it off and hold it sideways or do two simultaneously is fantastic. But in practice, holding your Joy-Con sideways is tiny. It's so much worse than holding a Wii remote sideways. It does not work for games like Smash. It barely works for something like Mario Kart because you need more precise control. If you're playing something like Mario Party, that one probably works a little bit better. But then again, even with the mini games, if you don't have that full control, it kind of sucks. Couple that with like the right Joy-Con having the stick like right in the middle of the controller when you hold it side. It's not my favorite. I wish they'd made the Joy-Cons a little bit better, and I hope they improve on the design going into the Switch 2, because I just really don't like this one. And now I want to talk about probably my favorite controller. I'm not sure if this is my favorite, but I really love it. Pretty much everything about this design. That's the DualSense. I really love the DualSense controller. I love the tactile feedback. I love the touchpad. I love how ergonomic it is to hold. I think this is the most comfortable controller I've ever held. That right along with the Switch Pro controller and for an extension the Xbox Series X, which is also a fabulous controller. I don't want to discount that one. I'm not going to say that one's not good. It's fantastic as well. But the DualSense, the way that they incorporated the haptic feedback, and I just think it feels really nice to hold. I love the DualSense controller. I think it looks super sleek too. A big improvement design-wise from the DualShock 4. I like that they changed the name too. It's a nice little mix-up. The DualSense, it just has a nice ring to it. So I think right now that's my favorite controller. If it's not the DualSense, it's definitely going to be the GameCube controller for how innovative and how much longevity it really has. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.